All right, how y'all doing? It's Elgin Woodside. Got my boy Christian Marshall. How you doing today, brother?
Man, I'm beautiful. I'm blessed, man. It's been a great day.
Yes, sir.
One of the long ones, but it's great. We're all good.
Hey, a long day is a good day. But yeah, this is gonna be a real good show. We got a lot of entertaining topics on the docket. We're gonna be talking about worker regret, the port strike that they had is now been resolved temporarily. So we're gonna get into that. Also talk about
Yeah.
some financial news and some political news. So y'all stay tuned. But let's start with this first one. We're gonna start off with the student debt that workers have accumulated. Workers are now regretting going to get their college degrees because they don't believe that they were worth it. So I'm going to start this
28
video.
year old Kira Cheney works for the government, lives in a basement apartment with her boyfriend in San Francisco, and stresses about her college loans. How much did they add up to? About
It's around like 280 some thousand.
$280,000?
Yeah.
Cheney followed the classic recipe for success. She graduated from Penn State, but now she's facing down decades of debt. Have you ever tried to figure out, if I put aside this much a month, this is the year when I'll pay off those $280,000?
I mean, that would be the goal. I've always thought of winning the lottery, but
And Cheney's not alone. 43 million Americans carry student debt. They owe the government more than $1.7 trillion. And about 2/3 of all graduates leave college carrying debt. Many will work their entire careers without being able to pay it off. No wonder college debt has become a White House priority.
we can't go out as much as we used to for dinners, and we can't take as much trips as we want to unless it's in our budget. So it does affect us.
One reason for the crisis? Skyrocketing tuition. Another reason? More people going to college in the first place.
In the early 1960s, only about 8% of Americans had a college degree. And now it's getting close to 40%.
Wow.
Right? So it's a big difference. You were pretty special in the 1960s if you had a college degree.
Peter Capelli is a professor of management at the
You want to pause right here for a second?
Yeah, we
I
can
guess
definitely do
I
that.
guess any of those pique interest. I know a couple of them pique my interest. Right here,
Mhm.
43 million people have student loan debt. That's a lot of people, man. And they said it was $1.7 trillion, 2/3 of
All
people.
together.
Yeah, man. So let's kind of deep dive into that. So 1.7 trillion. I think right now the actual national debt is up to like 33 trillion or probably even a little more now. It constantly goes up. So
Right.
yeah, we're a pretty good amount of that of just student loan debt, So if
Mhm.
we can get that away, that'll take off a big chunk of that overall national debt. And to me, man, you shouldn't be leaving a place, that's supposed to be putting you in a better position career and business wise with, you know, that much substantial amount of capital that you have to pay back to the organization that helped you get there. Cause to me, that's kind of counteractive, if you get what I'm saying.
Mhm.
Like it's not really solving the issue. It's just producing a new problem. That's what I see it as.
Yeah, and I also think another thing that plays a factor when it comes to like why maybe like the root of everything, like maybe why we why this debt is accumulated is because one, I mean, everything go for me, everything goes back to financial education. Like what is for me to have 100,000, 280,000 worth of debt, what is the value of that versus what I can potentially come out of school making? And that's why I personally feel like even knowing what I know now, is definitely like if you're going to school, what are you going to school for? What are you going to school for? And if you are going to college for that, if it's costing you hundreds of thousands of dollars, is there an alternative route for you to get to the same destination? Because just because everybody's taking this train doesn't mean you have to hop on that train if it doesn't make sense, right? Especially if that train costs $280,000, right? And this one costs $50,000 over the course of time, right? So I think that's like the financial education and understanding, what loans really are and what that really means for the future is very important because I know a lot of people, even like myself, like you just kind of sign it because you like you got to cover a gap or you got to cover some expenses. Like you just never know. So all those different things, play a factor in that. But
Yeah, but
I think
that makes me, my bad. Go ahead. Thought you were done.
no. You good? Go ahead. Say what you're
No,
gonna
I
say.
was going to say, based off what you just said, that makes me ask the question, like, whose responsibility is that to give you that education, as far as, what degree you should pick versus the amount of debt that you're going to partake in to get that degree? Like, should that be on the school, like the high school? Should that be on the parents? Like, who should be giving that information to the kids? Because to me, you should probably do that research yourself, because you're the one who ultimately making that decision as a grown person. Now that you're 18 years old, most people who graduate high school are at 18 or above, or at least 17. You should be able to make your own decision as far as, where would I be after I finish going through this college program. Am I
Right.
going to be where I want to be? Is this what I want to do for my career? And can I even afford doing this? But a lot of people, I think, when they're at that age, they're not really even really grasping the fact that they're adults now, or like you're pretty much on your own now, and you're gonna be in reality, versus, you know, being under the protection of your parents or your guardians.
Yeah, and I also think that also goes back down to the parents also ultimately too, because you think about it, at 17, 18, we wasn't really thinking about those type of things, honestly. We just knew that we wanted to go to school because, schools are potentially going to give us a career or something else that we'll be able to take advantage of later on. We didn't really think about what debt, how debt plays a factor into it. Like think about it, because even some financial concepts, right, that we should be knowing like middle school, high school aren't even taught in school. So how do you expect a 17, 18, 19-year old who wasn't even educated by their parents? Their parents might not even know some of these things because their parents didn't know. So it's a very big question as to, where does it start at? And honestly, I feel like at some point, right, I feel like that's the reason why actually there are now starting to implement those financial literacy curriculums in schools now, because of these type of numbers, right? And it's crazy because you would think that this would have already been in place, right? And so then that begs the question, why wasn't it already in place? We can keep going down the rabbit hole, but at the end of the day, I feel like schools, they're trying to do that right now, implement that, because that's where they are most of the time. Like think about it, going from kindergarten through 12th grade, you at school 8 hours of the day, each day, 5 days out of the week. You there more than you are at your house at the end of the day. So I feel like that should be something that the schools, right, try to implement in terms of that. And then also, scholarships, grants. A lot of people don't know that there's scholarships and grants and things like that they can actually take advantage of. So most people just go to automatically take out a loan because that's what they know. That's what's the first. That's the first thing that's offered, basically, right? But if you don't know that there's grants and things like that that you can take advantage of, you're going to be in that position where you're going to get that debt. You know what I'm
Yes.
saying? So
Yeah, bro. Like, to me, this isn't even anything that needs to be that elaborate, as far as like having a whole financial literacy program established at the school. To me, this is something as simple as meeting with a real qualified counselor and saying, "Hey, this is what I want to go to school for. This is the school that I got accepted into. This is how much it costs, and this is how much I can pay up front. If you can't afford it, then you shouldn't do it." Like, it's
right.
literally that simple. But I think we overcomplicate it and try to add these robust programs of like financial literacy and adding curriculums, and it just makes things way more complicated. Now you have to hire more teachers. Now the teachers have to
Mm-hmm.
learn more, and they have to, do more work, versus
That's
somebody
a good
just
point.
saying the school counselor needs to help these kids make the right decision, or the parents need to help these kids make the right decision together, you
Yeah.
know. But nobody's taking
Yeah.
responsibility for it.
Yeah. No, everybody just pointing the finger, looking like the Spider-Man meme. Like, who's it on for real? I think, like you said, everybody like the counselor, like we're at that point where you're trying to decide where you go to school. That's who you usually go to is your counselor. But now you got to question, okay, is this counselor even qualified to even give me that type of advice for real? Now, do we need to go and look at who we hiring as counselors? Because I know from my experience in high school, you know, it was more so focused on like go to the best of the best schools, wherever that looks like.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? These are the options that you basically have based on where you want to go. They don't talk about how much it costs because they say that's not on them. That's on the child and the parent at the end of the day and what they can
Exactly.
afford.
And all
So
that's
that's
doing is
where the
feeding
blame
into
comes in.
this. Is feeding into this part, the tuition hikes. So if you want to go to the best of the best schools, everybody's focused on getting accepted to Penn State, Rice, Harvard, Yale, Princeton, like all the big schools. there's a
Hmm.
price associated with getting into those schools if they don't give you a full ride scholarship. And most people not getting that unless they got a 4.0 and got great recommendations. So if you look at this chart, you can't even blame this on inflation because the rate that this chart is increasing is way above inflation.
Yep.
But nothing is changing about the school. The school is not really updating the curriculum like that.
Right.
They not updating the
Not at
staff.
all.
It's the same teachers. Like the teachers haven't learned anything new. They're not going back to school to educate themselves and add value to the kids. It's the same people doing the same curriculum. So
Same
why is it
curriculum.
costing more? And
Right.
everything it should be cheaper because we have more technology to integrate into it to make things more efficient and effective. So how is it going up when it should be going down because the teachers in the school is doing less?
Right. And I
It's
thought an
just
interesting thing that he said was like that only about 8% of people, right, or whatever that number was, had a college degree. So that just means that there was more focus on people that were working, most more vocational schools teaching you a trade of some kind, right? And that was the focus because for some reason that wasn't really a focus. Because if you get a degree, most times you're gonna end up in the office somewhere. With that time, it was more industrial. So now they focus on okay, we need electricians, we need plumbers, we need contractors, we need steel people that operate these steel mills, we need all these different things. But as that time changed, right? And I don't know, I personally don't know what could have changed that, but I feel like there needs to be a focus on going back to that because even now, an electrician, right, can make more money than somebody that's working in the office with a degree.
exactly. That's because the demand and supply has shifted. Because now you still have the same demand for those trades, but you got more people going into college versus going into the trades. So like
Absolutely.
it shifted. Like they said, it was at like what 8% he said in like the 1960s. So if you had a
Hmm.
degree, you were very rare. So you probably got paid a lot more compared to somebody in the trade. But now it's shifting to where more people, like 40% of people have degrees now. So it's like we could find somebody with a degree, but now we can't find nobody with a trade. So who gonna get paid more? The
The
person with the
person with the
trade.
trade. Absolutely. And nowadays, you don't even need, you need more than a bachelor's degree. You need a master's degree to actually get that earning wage that you really want to be able to outpace, your debts and your inflation and all the other stuff. Right now,
Exactly.
and that's just how it's going. It's that the time has basically changed. So it's
Right.
like, okay, how do we make that change? But I mean, that's we just here to put this on Front Street. We can't figure it
Right.
out. But it is interesting though. It is
Yep.
definitely interesting.
But yeah, let's play a little bit more of this. We don't got to play the whole thing, but
At the
just see.
University of Pennsylvania's Wharton School of Business. But you are also the author of a book relevant to our topic today
Yeah,
called Will College Pay Off?
that's right.
Will college pay off?
Um, it depends. There's no doubt that going to college is incredibly useful for people in terms of improving their lives. What everybody's interested in more is financially, is this a good investment? Will it pay off and that you'll be better off than in a high school graduate? Yeah, if they graduate, for sure. If they don't, maybe not.
Trouble is, most students don't.
Can we both agree he just said nothing?
Yeah, that boy, that boy didn't
He
say
did not
nothing.
answer that question at all. It was a yes or
And,
no.
nah, bro. And it's like, and I mean, for me, now I thought that he would have said something more along the lines of, it just depends on what you're going to school for, because it really
Right. He didn't
does.
even say that.
He didn't
That's
even
the
say that, like, because like I would agree that honestly, just knowing what I know now and the way that everything is lined up now from an economic standpoint, if like you said, it's supply and demand, right? So right now, a big need as far as like technology and everything else, you need to be into a STEM career. I'm sorry, if you are not in the STEM career,
oh yeah.
right, it's going to be a lot harder for you to get those same wages because that's not the demand right now, right?
Yep.
You got cybersecurity, you got AI, you got all these different technological advances that require people in science, technology, engineering, and mathematics, because that's
Yes.
what build all these different things, and that's why people. That's one of the one things I. That's why honestly, that's why I chose engineering. I saw what a mechanical engineer made. I'm like, oh, I'm gonna just go
Yeah.
ahead and do that, and just
Yeah.
make sure whatever job I try to get is at least somewhat centered around something that I'm interested in. That way, I can work in that field long enough to start getting some income. You know what I mean? But if you can go into
Exactly.
school for like history, psychology, right?
Yeah,
Those
we
require
can
more
use
advanced
AI.
degrees and more
We
money.
can just
Yeah,
use AI now. We don't even gotta. Yeah, we don't need historians. We can go. We can Google it, Chat GPT it, and it's gonna give us the answer. It's gonna tell us exactly what happened. So
right. And even when it comes to like, and then of course like nurses fall in that science in the science field, health field, because that's always going to be forever be a demand, right? As far as
exactly
health, right? So that makes sense. But we're talking
right.
about you going, for art, like there's only so many Jean Basquiat's in the world. Like, I'm sorry, like, what I'm saying, liberal art, whatever liberal arts degree. I'm
You
just
can have the,
saying,
you can have the artist at your hat, boy.
and I appreciate all the artists out there because people are very talented, but let's think about let's think about for real, just put into perspective about how many people are really going to be that small percentage,
Right.
right?
That's facts
That's
though.
going to be in that successful place as far as art goes. I'm not saying you can't do it, but it's just hard. You know what I'm saying? To
Yeah.
get what you
You
what you
have
think
to
you're
be
worth based on that.
you have to be the top 1%. If you not in the top 1% of a non-STEM field, then you need to be in a STEM field. I'm not even gonna say 1%. If you ain't in the top 10%, let's just be
10%.
generous. Because you could still probably make 6 figures at the top 10%. If you're in the top 1%, you're probably gonna make 7 figures. But if you're
Right.
top 10% of a non-STEM field, you're probably still gonna make 6 figures or more. Versus if you go into the STEM field, you could be in the top 40% and probably still make great money. So
Enough
it's
to make a living in
right.
today's economy, like you can be able to
Exactly.
make enough a living.
Just because the demand is there. But yeah, let's get
Absolutely.
into the next thing. All right. So the next thing we want to talk about is the port strike. So as y'all know, the East and Gulf Coast ports were closed down temporarily due to a strike for the workers. They wanted to increase their wages. So let's talk about that. It looks like they did come up with a deal temporarily. So
on the West Coast, 7 o'clock there on the East Coast. We have breaking news that we want to get to right now. You'll remember if you were joining us on midnight on Monday, October the 1st, when those port workers went on strike. They went off the job onto the picket line. We are breaking in right now because the parties have reached a tentative agreement here. We have live pictures. I'm going to bring some of them up here, not only in New York, but also there at the Port of Savannah in Georgia as well. Well, this is what we know. The union representing those 45,000 striking U.S. dock workers at ports up and down the eastern seaboard and the Gulf Coast. Well, they have reached a deal with the U.S. Maritime Alliance to suspend their strike until January the 15th to provide time to negotiate a new contract. That's according to a person briefed on the matter to Fox here. So the strike is over for now. There's this 90-day window for talks to continue. This is tentative at the moment here. If talks break down past January 15th, presumably the strike will go into effect. But they have bought themselves time here. The union, remember, the International Longshoremen's Association, will resume working immediately, at least until January the 15th. The agreement will allow both the union and the U.S. Maritime Alliance, which represents both the shippers and the ports here, time to negotiate a new 6-year contract. So the person to the Associated Press also said both sides reached agreement on wage increases, but details were not available here. Fox Business, though, does have the details. If no full deal is reached by then, by January the 15th, the offer that is on the table right now, that offer is a 62% wage increase. That hike will be pulled from the table if in the interim they cannot still agree on this here. This is a conditional offer. It's been made to the ILA. The ILA has accepted this right now. 62% wage increase here. Not entirely sure if they have agreed or not on some of these other concerns these dock workers had, like the threat of automation to their jobs, also some with regard to their retirement plans as well. This is what we know right now. The The deal reached only matters right now with their base pay, with their wages, and they're getting a 62% hike. It's on the table, that offer, for the next 90 days here. In the meantime, we are getting in right now a joint statement in from both parties. Let's take that here. All right, so this is what they say. This is a joint statement between the ILA and the Maritime Alliance, quote, that the International Longshoremen's Association and the United States Maritime Alliance Limited have reached a tentative agreement on wages and have agreed to extend the master contract until January 15th, 2025, to return to the bargaining table to negotiate all other outstanding issues. Effective immediately, all current job actions will cease and all work covered by the master contract will resume here.
All right. So yeah, let's kind of break that down real quick. So these workers, first off, I want to say I respect any blue collar profession where you work in a dangerous environment, because that job that they do is very dangerous. Like, you don't know
Yeah.
what's going to come in on those ports. People trying to smuggle stuff. People might be coming in on those ports, illegal drugs. Also, just shipping containers in general. Barges, loading barges. Unloading. Materials. That's a very dangerous job, and people, they have fatalities. That may occur during that work. So thank you for everybody who's involved with that. But let's kind of talk about from an economic standpoint what that even means. So if these wages increase, most of the time, whenever you import materials, the cost goes to the consumer, which is you and me, or anybody else who's listening to this video. And that's anything from produce to electronics, cars, anything that's being imported from any other part of the country or outside countries. So if these wages increase, you should expect um, a percentage of that increase to go towards the end consumer costs of goods on a retail spectrum.
I.e. taxes.
Right. I.e. taxes, i.e. when you go to the grocery store, the egg's gonna cost about 30% more, or in this case, 60% more. Because people at the top line are not going to just eat the costs of their business. Because right now, this is already a very low margin business. Shipping in, goods and retail sales. It's about the volume. Like, if you have more volume, then that's what produces the more profits. It's not really about the margin itself. It's about the amount of volume you can sell to get, the amount of profit that you need. So they still need to maintain those slim margins that they already have. So that cost has to go to somebody. And in most cases, it's going to go to the end consumer. So that's just something to be on the lookout for. That's going to be coming up. Sounds like they got an agreement until January 15th. But once the new president comes into place, this is something that they're going to have to deal with. It's going to be a high priority, probably day one. So,
Right. And my question is, one of my questions is, when is 62% wage increase, right? But then I like to, when they talk about percentages, I'm like 62% of what? Because everybody makes something different. So how does that then affect their, their cash, right? The actual dollar income? Because we can talk in percentages, but when it comes to actual dollar amount, what's that increase actually going to be? And we still got to talk about expenses and other coverages and benefits and whatever else they may have in place. You know what I'm saying? That could be affected by that wage increase, because just because we're going up in wage, what happens to the other benefits and things that they may be getting? Does that affect my, my pension? Does that affect 401k that I have with the union? If you with a union, most times you have a pension. So how does that get affected? If I'm doing something one place, it's not just like I'm going to go up in wages and nothing else is going to be affected. Something else, like you said, whether it's the cost to the consumer or even to those people individually, how does that then affect what other benefits they actually have? Which is why I still think they actually have other issues, which is why I think they're actually still in negotiation technically. And then another thing is, okay, this is a temporary negotiation. So, have we temporarily agreed to the 62% wage increase and that's going to affect immediately? Or are you just saying up until January 15th, this is the offer that's on the table? Does that go into effect right now?
yeah,
Right? Or am I keeping the
that's the
same
offer that's
wage?
on the table. So they basically extended the contract that they have right now to give time for negotiation to get the rate that they want. But that was the initial offer, and they can either accept it now and take it, or they can negotiate and try to get more, or they might end up with less, depending on what the
Right,
negotiation
yeah,
is. If they
until
run
that
out of
January
time,
15th.
right?
Yeah, that January 15th deadline. Okay, yeah, that makes sense.
So that's kind
Okay,
of
that
where
makes
it's at.
sense. And one of the coaches I work with, he actually worked as a longshoreman. So I got to talk to him. I want to see how that affected. But that's over here on the West Coast. I know this is on the East Coast, but I wanted to ask him if that if there's some type of effect over here on this side, because there's a lot of imported goods that come into the West Coast as well when it comes to this side of the country. So
Yeah, and even in Avondale on the West Bank, they used to have one of the largest shipyards. My grandpa used to work there. I think they recently closed it down, but yeah, he used to work there for a long time. So that's a job, that's been around for a long time, and they have a large group, a strong union group. So this is a very key, economic issue that we need to work through in the near future. So just keep your eyes out for that. We just want to keep everybody informed. So
and just
yeah,
think about it like if they would have continued the strike, right? How is that going to affect supply and demand and what's coming in? That's because basically now nothing is made in the U.S. anymore, right? Everything is imported now, right?
yeah,
Everything's getting built or manufactured overseas and then importing it back here, or they're just getting it from another supplier vendor overseas. So like, just put that into perspective for a second, like exactly how important that job really is, which is why it's a big thing because it hasn't happened in over 50 years,
right,
right? Those people, right, that work, those longshoremen, they control the goods. They really have all the control. This is where the power of unity comes in, right? When it comes to understanding your worth, they understood where their worth was, and they had enough courage, right, to be able to at least stand up and say, hey, this is the job we've been doing for this long, but we need more because that's how important our jobs are and how important our safety is based on what we're doing because we're effectively controlling everything that comes in and out of the country when you think
yeah,
about it.
yeah,
So, but this I think that was very. I'm glad they came to at least to some type of uh, to some type of temporary solution at the moment. But I really hope that they can come to that agreement beforehand because at the end of the day, like sure what if they try to get more and then they end up getting a lesser offer, right? And
exactly.
then how is that going to affect how are those workers going to feel then, and how is that going to affect the economy after that happens,
Yeah.
right?
And
So
then
that's
and
a
then
couple different
this
factors.
little grace period gives, whoever more time to, establish a new workforce or negotiate wages with other people or train up new employees and get them
Mm-hmm.
working in, because that's usually what people do. Like whenever unions go on strike, they call in contract workers.
Right.
If that happens at a plant, they're gonna call in some contract operators and they're gonna do the job and get paid for it.
Mm-hmm.
There's always
Yep.
somebody looking for some work.
And somebody gonna do their job. I don't care if he
Yeah.
want to do the job. I got a family to feed. I got bills to pay. I'm not on strike. I'm about to go make this bread,
Yeah.
right? So
Yep. But yeah, let's keep this thing moving. So yeah, that was topic number 2. We're gonna move into number 3, which is we have a crucial moment coming up as far as the election for 2025 president. So let's get right into it. We got a video kind of just breaking down the economic policies of both candidates. Nothing is opinion based, all factual based. And we're just gonna get right to it.
Realistic or unrealistic. If you want those opinions, feel free to read the comments down below. I'm sure you'll find them there. So I'm doing this video because I read the comments. This was highly requested. I hope this information, this summary, helps you understand what each candidate is proposing. So let's get started. Okay, so we're going to focus on their economic policies, their plans that deal with money and finances. So I'm going to cover their plans on income taxes, lowering inflation, affordable housing, Social Security, prescription drug pricing, international trade deals, and illegal immigration. So for the immigration part, you'll see how that ties in with money and finances. Okay, so let's start off with this. Here's something that Harris and Trump both agree upon. No federal income taxes on tips. So no taxes on tipped income. So whether you like the idea or not, well, I would say too bad because they're both going to be pushing for it. Of course, we don't know how hard or how seriously that they're going to be advocating for this, but here's what they're saying. So Trump floated this idea first: no federal income taxes or Social Security taxes or Medicare taxes on tipped income. So he first said this in June in Las Vegas, and then Kamala Harris said the same thing. And then Trump accused Harris of copying him. So that's how it went down. Those are the facts. Those are not opinions. There are approximately 4 million Americans in tipped occupations where the bulk of their compensation comes from tips. But just so you know, the president cannot enact this with an executive order. This would require congressional approval. Now let's move on to inflation. So fighting inflation or reducing inflation. Both Trump and Harris say that they want to address the rising prices of everyday cost of living. So they have each provided different ways of lowering inflation. Harris says that she's going to place a federal ban on price gouging. She says that in her first 100 days, she will pass a national ban on price gouging for food and groceries. So the plan is to give the Federal Trade Commission and prosecutors the authority to go after companies that are believed to be involved in price gouging or price fixing. Now, here's what Trump is saying. He's saying that he's going to sign an executive order on his first day to fight inflation. So Trump said, and I quote, "I will use every tool and authority at my disposal to defeat inflation and to bring consumer prices down rapidly." So Trump said, and I quote, "You just watch. They'll come down and they'll come down fast." So Trump says that his strategy is going to be two-pronged. One, it's to eliminate regulation that is costly and overburdensome. And two, boost oil and gas production. So Trump said, and I quote, "We're going to drill, baby, drill. That's going to bring down prices of everything." Now let's move on to affordable housing, and we're going to start with Harris. And what she wants to do,
pause that right there?
I would summarize.
Yeah,
Can
what's
we
up?
pause that right there real quick? Because I'm trying to understand. Because one, from what I'm hearing, what I'm seeing, this is my first time seeing it. Y'all, I want to let y'all understand. This is my first time.
Yeah, it's my first time seeing it too.
So I see, and just purely factual, going strictly off the facts. I see here in this situation when it comes to inflation, of course, large companies control the cost of a lot of different things. Like whether we understand that or whether we know that or not.
Right.
So it would make sense that when what Harris is proposing is going after the people that are pretty much causing the inflation, right? But my question is, how does that affect? What is that backlash from that, right? Just because they're focusing on one area, how is that going to affect everything else, right? And then I see a plan there. I can see how that can possibly, that's a first step into doing something, right? Because there's a lot of action that's going to happen in between that time if this was to actually happen. And then on Trump's stance, if you go back, can you go back to his to that first slide? He said he's going to give an executive order on his first day to fight inflation. I will use every tool and authority at my disposal to defeat inflation. And then he said those two steps were what? Go to the next one. Eliminate regulation that is costly and overburdensome, and then boost oil and gas production. For me personally, I'm trying to figure out where. I don't know. Maybe this is a question that you might have had too. Exactly where's the plan and what regulation he's talking about that's costly and overburdensome.
So whenever you're in different businesses, especially when it comes to like consumer goods or providing, retail goods, there's a lot of like governmental regulations that you have to follow and abide by to, produce these products. I'm personally in the industry. I'm not going to be too specific, but I'm personally in the industry, where we have a lot of regulations involved. So if the regulations are reduced, the cost to produce, in a manufacturing setting is a lot cheaper, like tons cheaper. Like it's not even really even a number that you can really say is crazy. But I think this is a more. I'm not even gonna give my opinion. But and also so that's I'm gonna leave it there. But there's a significant cost in regulation and
that's
manufacturing.
associated with that.
Yeah,
Right.
and
That's associated with
also boosting oil and gas production. If you can keep oil and gas production locally versus using exported, there's taxes and there's tariffs and there's fees associated with using external oil. Of course, you do a lot better not using it because you don't have to deal with the internal regulation and dealing with the in-house complications of producing your own oil and gas. But I'm trying to you're right. But I think both can work. I think both can
that.
work. I think they both have really good plans. I'm gonna be honest with you. They both
Yeah.
have really good plans, but it's just a matter of which one will work.
Yeah,
because
it's two different approaches. It's very much
right.
two different approaches.
This one is difficult because how do you even judge what price gouging is? Like, what's the definition of it, and what would be the criteria to which you can convict somebody of price gouging? Because if it costs more for me to make something, I have to increase the price of it.
Right.
So is that price gouging, or is that me increasing my margins to get back to where I was? And then also here, the difficult part about this one, let's see. How do you eliminate the regulation? Like what hoops do you have to jump through? And also what infrastructure do you need to produce more oil? What's the cost of that?
And what other parties, right, that have come up with these regulations do you have to bring to the table to make sure that make sure that actually happens, right? And make sure it's not to make sure that it's actually that makes sure it actually reduces costs, because at the end of the day, if that affects safety, right, in some form or fashion, that may not be something that you want to be able to actually eliminate.
Exactly.
Right. So I can see how both of these are like they're good plans, like they're good proposals, but at the same time, there are different factors that could, make it hard and difficult to actually get it to go through, right, and make it happen. Because at the end of the day, inflation it happens every year. So to say that from a financial standpoint, to say that you're going to reduce inflation, because it's already on average around 3%. And I don't know, and I don't personally remember a time or know a time and when inflation was below that, right? Because that's what it's about right now. The only time that at least in my form in my years of living, right, I can remember COVID, inflation is about 9-10%, right, which is super crazy, right? And so it's almost now, but it's hard to actually kind of regulate that. So how is that going to affect everything else? Are you saying that costs are just going to dramatically go, say, from like here in California, right, in the South Bay area, gas may be around, like $5-6, right? Let's say, for instance, it's about $5-6. Is that going to then drop down to about half, like $3-4? Because even here, it's starting to slowly like decrease a little bit at a time. Currently, right now, as it is, I've noticed that, right? So how much lower is it actually really going to get realistically, as far as inflation is the real question, and that's for both people. Like, how is that really going to be able to do that?
Yeah.
So
I'm not going to speak on it because I'm not even about to give my opinion, but I'm just trying to give all the facts. Yeah.
Yeah. No, but I mean, I'm just posing questions, not necessarily directly to you, but just questions to actually basically
things for the audience to consider.
Yeah. Right. Things to consider.
Now let's move on to
facts.
Affordable housing. And we're going to start with Harris. And what she wants to do, I would summarize it up in 5 bullet points. So the first thing is that she wants to give $25,000 to first-time home buyers to help with their down payments. So this will be for people that have paid their rents on time for 2 years. And number 2, give a $10,000 tax credit to first-time home buyers. Number 3, increase home building by providing a first-ever tax incentive for builders that build starter homes. So the homes must be sold to first-time home buyers. So as you can see, there's a lot of benefits for first-time home buyers. Number 4, expand tax incentives to home builders that build affordable rental housing units. And number 5, repurpose some federal land to build affordable housing. Okay, so here's what Trump is proposing at the moment, and this is more straightforward. So 3 main things. Number 1 is to cut unnecessary regulations that raise the price of housing. Number 2, reduce mortgage interest rates by slashing inflation. And number 3, open tracts of federal lands for housing construction. Now moving on to income taxes. So Trump, well, if you remember, made major changes to the tax code in 2017. This was the 2017 Tax Cuts and Jobs Act. So there were major changes to individual income taxes as well as corporate taxes. So the bulk of these tax changes will expire at the end of 2025. So some have already started to wind down, so they call it phasing out, and some have just completely expired already. So Trump is saying that he's not going to allow these tax cuts to expire, that he's going to renew them. Well, obviously because these were his tax cuts. But not only that, he's also saying that he's going to further cut taxes for people of all incomes as well as businesses. So Trump said, and I quote, "To get economic relief to workers and families, we will make additional tax cuts. That's what gave us the great economy. We'll make tax cuts additionally, and we'll make them permanent." Okay, so if you think about it, the tax rules that we have right now, they're from Trump, and he's just saying that he's gonna do more. He's gonna do more tax cuts. But one of the bigger changes that Trump is proposing is making Social Security income tax-free. So currently, Social Security income is tax-free if you make less than $25,000 as an individual or $32,000 as married filing jointly. So if you make more than that, then Social Security income is taxable income. So those exemption amounts, I mean, they're so low because they don't get adjusted for inflation. You know, of course, that's unfair to Social Security recipients, but that's just the way it is. Now, Kamala Harris is saying that she will not raise taxes on anyone making under $400,000 a year. So Harris says that she will expand the child tax credits from the current $2,000 per child per year to as much as $3,600 a child per year. Provide a child tax credit up to $6,000 for newborns. And expand the earned income tax credits, so the EITC. So this would cut taxes for lower income families by, so it's estimated to be about $1,250 on average each year. Now, I'm gonna tell you one proposal by Trump and another one by Harris. So we're gonna start with Trump. So this is one-sided where I'm not gonna say anything about Harris on this issue because Harris hasn't said anything about this issue. So this is regarding international trade. Okay, so Trump says that he will add a tariff of at least 10% on all imports from all countries. So more recently, he's saying that it could be as high as 20% all across the board. So Trump says that he wants an additional tariff on Chinese imports that could be as high as 60%. So Trump said, and I quote, "We're going to have 10 to 20% tariffs on foreign countries that have been ripping us off for years." So essentially, this means that if certain goods or services are imported to the US, then there will be an additional tax on those and they're going to cost more. So this is generally done to protect or promote your domestic industries. So Trump says that these new tariffs will bring back jobs and raise revenue for the USA. Now, let me tell you what Harris is saying about lowering drug prices and healthcare. So Harris wants to cancel medical debt for millions of Americans, remove medical debt from credit reports, accelerate the negotiations with big pharmaceutical companies to lower costs for Medicare, and expand the $35 monthly cap on out-of-pocket costs for insulin and so this is the $2,000 annual limits on out-of-pocket costs for prescription drugs by making this for all Americans, not just for Medicare. And we're gonna end with this one. This is illegal immigration. So I'm bringing this one up because it makes an impact on the US economy. Even the Federal Reserve cites the impact of undocumented workers and the BLS in their economic reports. So we're gonna start with Trump. So Trump says that a stricter immigration policy will create a stronger US economy. Trump argues that illegal aliens reduce wages for everyone and takes jobs from native-born Americans. So Trump says that he's going to do a crackdown that could involve mass deportations, detention camps, and the expansion of the border wall. So Trump said, and I quote, "I would not rule out anything. We're not leaving them in the country. We're bringing them out." Okay, so Kamala Harris is now giving a stricter stance against illegal immigration. So Harris is flip-flopping on the border wall. So this is just one example. So this is not an opinion, this is a fact. Harris once said that the border wall was un-American, but now Harris says that she pledges to spend hundreds of millions of dollars on expanding the wall. Okay, but Harris has a much softer stance than Trump. Harris opposes family separation and opposes mass deportations. Okay, so that's your summary of Kamala Harris and Donald Trump, their economic policies. Please let me know your opinion. I look forward to reading your comments.
So let's start with the housing real quick. So $25,000 to first-time home buyers that paid their rent on time for 2 years. So I guess we have to verify our rent payments for 2 years. We have to probably send that into some kind of database or something. And then you'll get credit towards your, I'm guessing you'll get credit towards your property at the closing table. Okay.
Yeah.
Then $10,000.
They probably have to upload that with the rest of the documents that they get, like their statements and everything else like that.
Right. That kind of makes sense. Also, okay, I like this. The first time home buyers building for first time home buyers, we get a tax credit for that. That's pretty cool. Also, tax incentives for building rent houses. It looked like for affordable housing. Okay. And then
So
also,
that means, so I guess as far as affordable housing, I would guess that would fall as that multifamily or single family or both.
so it sounds like both. So they'll do the tax incentive for if you build a single family that, you know, first time home buyer buys, like they have to buy it. That's what it said. And then also you could do one for if you build like a apartment complex that is zoned or I guess determined as affordable, you know, rental housing, you know. So, okay. That's pretty simple. And it sounds like Donald Trump, he's talking about if he can reduce the regulations, you know, associated with building houses, then it'll make it more affordable, which makes sense. Also, if you reduce inflation, the interest rates will go down.
They go down, right? That makes sense.
And then also he was going to do the same thing. Him and Kamala still had the same thing as far as finding federal land to rezone into residential because we have a housing shortage. So if we can rezone some of that federal land, we can build, you know, affordable housing on it.
And I guess he's going to use his other stance in terms of the regulations and the oil and boosting the oil and the gas production too. Just based on the information that's been given to reduce inflation.
Exactly. It sounds like the difference between the two is that Harris is actually going after the problem directly and like actually going into the market itself and manipulating it versus using the tools on a macro scale to make it kind of self-stabilize itself. Like you're doing a forced cure versus just a natural cure, basically.
Right.
That's the difference, really. I'm not saying if one is better than the other. It's just that's what the difference is. So Trump is basically going to do his same income tax and renew it, and he says he's going to add more. And then Harris is basically saying you get a child tax credit. Also, you get what else was it? It's child tax credit.
And then expand the earned income. And expand the earned income tax credit.
Yeah. So I guess that's for low income, which I don't even know. I need to look into that policy and see what that income range is to get that. But I don't know what it is, but it says low income. So I'm not really sure what that means. It's not very specific. But yeah, so child. So so if you have a child, it's good. And I think she recently added something that for small business owners, you'll get a $50,000 tax credit
Yeah, I
Or
think I think I remember seeing her mention that about the tax
yeah,
credit for the small
but
business owners.
that's only in the first year of business though. So if you already started your
Yeah,
business, you're not gonna get that. And it's
right,
also it's not cash in your hand, it's a tax credit. So if your business didn't even cost that much to start up, then you're not gonna get the 50,000. It's just gonna be whatever it
right,
costs to start up.
right.
And international trade. So it sounds like Trump is really the only president in recent history that I have heard really like crack down on international trade like
It's a
this.
trade.
Like
Yeah,
nobody really talks about it like that.
but it
And
does. I mean, at the end of the day, it does affect everything. So when he talks
yeah,
about taking that 10%, 20%, um, it's almost like they said, it kind of forces like especially like manufacturing, a lot of manufacturing things like that to be kind of stabilized inside the U.S., which is what it was before,
right.
before companies started outsourcing, right, and then just started importing that stuff. Which I think if you talk about putting a tariff on something, that will now you know. I mean, I think a 10% tax on somebody coming into like think about like Monopoly. You land on my spot,
Exactly.
you're gonna have to pay that fee, right? So that's income for the country if you kind of think about it like that. Which then can, now my question is, what would the funds and accumulated from those tariffs then be put towards if we are taking that tax credit or taking that tariff? Like, is that going to be used to towards the national debt? Is that going to be used towards reducing the inflation? Like, how does that, that's just a question to kind of think about, like what it's going to be. But I mean, as far as that, that's a, I mean, that makes sense, right? That makes sense in terms
It
of putting that
does.
tariff on there. Yeah.
I'm not really too familiar with the healthcare policies, obviously. Um, we're both pretty young, so we don't really deal with this a lot, thank God. But I know there's a lot of people out there who are dealing with things like this, and I probably should be more educated on it because you never know. But as of right now, I do not have any thoughts on this particular section. What about you?
Yeah. In terms of medical care, like in terms of Medicare, and things like that. I mean, like I said, I am pretty young, so I mean, you notice that it gets, you pay towards it for, comes out of your check, right?
Right, right,
But in terms of medical debts and costs, I, think that, I don't really have a specific stance on it, but I think that, of course, I don't have an opinion on it, but I think that, just people got to get more educated in terms of eliminating those medical debts, because there's different ways to make sure you're not in a position to even not really even have any medical debts, but you just got to know what resources to actually take advantage of,
right,
because there is something called like in the financial service industry, right? In terms of insurance, life insurance, there's something called, right? So life insurance is not just for after you die. Like, you can actually utilize those benefits while you're living. So say if you become chronically ill, heart attack, stroke, things like that generally happen to people over the course of time as they get older, right? If you have a policy set up that has living benefits, then the company will then front you either in a lump sum or in increments, however you want to set it up. They will front you, right, that money to take care of whatever debts that have occurred from those illnesses,
right,
right? And generally, that's for the more severe cases. But then you have to think about it when it comes to Medicare, right? People that generally have Medicare are people that are older. So if people have more things like living benefits in place, long-term care in place, then the medical debts and things like that may not, or the medical costs may not even be an issue as of later on. A lot of people just don't have the right type of coverage, because long-term care are services that generally health insurance does not cover. And that's just getting knowledge and getting with somebody to understand that, right? So it's a couple different things that play into that, but I don't have a specific stance on it. I just thought that I would throw that information out there because a lot of people
yep,
are dealing with that issue. But that is a possible solution. Like, let's get
yep,
something with some benefits that my general health insurance doesn't really cover, especially if
yep,
you're young, because you're able to get those when you're younger, like while you're working and stuff like that. You'll be able to have that stuff later on. You won't have to really worry about medical debts and things like that.
exactly. I appreciate that information, brother. And lastly was the illegal immigration. This kind of a touchy subject, um, But it really does affect the US economy. Like, let's just be honest, that's just a fact. Of course, we want people who are in rough situations to have a place to come and seek asylum. At the same time, it does have a cause and effect relationship directly to the US economy whenever it does happen. So sound like Trump says he's going to be strict on it, mass deportations. Um, Also try to find a way to create more jobs for Americans, the jobs that were lost due to illegal immigration. And it sounds like he wants to expand the wall as well. And Kamala Harris also agreed on expanding the wall, but she does not believe in mass deportations um, or anything of that nature. So it's really just up to what you prefer, what you prefer to have. So that's pretty much a deep
Yeah.
dive right there. Like we said, we wanted to keep it real factual because we know uh, what kind of conversations politics can really turn into, and we don't really want that, energy on the channel. But we are going to keep everybody informed. We're not afraid to speak on things as facts, and if you want to know our opinions, you can reach out to us individually, and we can have a further discussion on that. But
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
yeah,
This is purely factual. We just want people to be informed that way. Because at the end of the day, um, at the end of the day, this is how I view it. Right. When it comes to times like this, because this is a similar conversation we have every 4 years. It's
right,
always the same type of conversation. In general, honestly, it does. Honestly, it matters it matters in some form of fashion about who's going to be in office. But honestly, they are pushing for a lot of these things. But you got to realize a lot of these things that they're proposing still have to go through an executive body called Congress, called the Senate, called the House of Representatives. They have to go through all that. So even though they're proposing these things, that does not mean it's promised. Just like in the market, past past performance does not guarantee future gains, right? Just because a stock performed at 50, 35% over the last 3 years does not mean the next 3 years is going to do the same thing, because who knows
yes,
what position that's going to be. So how I personally think about it is, no matter who's in office, right, you want to be in a position where you're not dependent on what's going to happen with the president or with the election and things like that. You got to think about your position and where you're currently at and what you want to do. Because at the end of the day, none of those things, realistically, the American dream or financial independence is not as being a position where other outside factors do not affect what you have going on from a financial standpoint, right?
exactly,
And you want to be able to work towards that position, or at least be able to say, yes, I'm consistently working towards that position, right? And that comes
exactly,
with education, that comes with being informed. At the end of the day, you choose, you pick what you want to do, right? Who you support, whatever it is, doesn't matter. But at the end of the day, you still have to go out every day, go to work, support your household, do those things. So really what matters is, what are you doing, right, to change your current situations, to change your
yes,
paradigm? Because it
yes,
makes no sense to try to depend on somebody else when you're the person living your life. Those people are not paying you. Those
exactly,
people aren't, they have to think about it. This is on a large macro scale. So
yes,
you may not even fit any of those things as far as the economy, how it affects you. You may be lower class, you may be middle class, you may be the 1%. But at the end of the
yes,
day, right, everybody's going to be affected some type of way, but you want to just at the end of the day make sure that you're in a position where you're in control of what's going on with your situation, because you're the only
yes,
person that can actually do that, right? And
yes,
that's factual. Like that's
yeah.
that's
And
factual.
and honestly, when it
So
comes to politics, man, we have to stop being so emotional about it. Because really it's not even an emotional thing. It's strictly facts and it's strictly results. And that's what business and life and economics is all about, right? When you go to work,
mhm.
nobody really cares about how you feel. We might have a little conversation by the coffee pot or by the water dispenser, but at the end of the day, we there to get a job done. And we have to think critically about, who we're choosing as our leader, and the things that they've actually done versus the things that they say. Because if we're being completely honest, no matter what party you choose, I've heard lies from pretty much every person who's going up on that stage has lied at some point. So you have to be able to think for yourself, go
Mhm.
off of actions, not just words, And you notice every 4 years, the only time you really hear a lot of policies get thrown out is when it's election time. Once they're elected, you don't hear really much at all. So you kind of left on your own to produce, like Christian was saying, produce for yourself, go out, put that work in, and build something for yourself. Because nobody's coming to save you and nobody's really looking out for you but your immediate friends and your environment. And honestly, if we're looking at politics, I think local politics is more important than federal politics anyway.
Right.
So this is an important election, but the even more important part is going to be who else you vote for down the ballot for your, respective areas, So I think
Absolutely.
people just need to stay informed, do your own research, take the information as a grain of salt as a starting point, to start doing your own research on it.
Absolutely. And this is my first time even seeing that video, right? And
Yeah.
even getting that breakdown to that degree. That's from a factual standpoint, because you hear everything in the air, especially with social media and everything else. There's always a perspective out there. Even in the news, there's always a perspective. So you have to do your due diligence, like you said, go do your own research. And at the end of the day, like you said, you got to learn, like it's like money. You got to learn how to remove your emotions from money. So at the end of the day, it is a tool, right? So just like with politics, you have to be able to remove yourself and go strictly off of the facts and not go off of what. It's like, that's like you getting in a relationship and you marry somebody for their potential and not for what they've done
Right.
since you've been in a relationship.
Exactly.
It's the same thing. So you got to be able to do
it. The resume gets you in the door, but the performance keeps you there.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I think we got, do we have one more thing or you want to?
Yeah, real quick. Let's knock out this last one.
Yeah.
And how can we reach?
So this is a story about the American dream. Looks like it now costs $4.4 million to actually achieve the American dream in your lifetime. So let's do a quick breakdown on this. Let's get this thing going.
Here to weigh in is Caleb Silver, Investopedia editor-in-chief. Caleb, 4.4 million. How did you come up with this number, and how does it compare to last year? And that was the first year of the report.
Yeah, 4.4 million sounds like a lot because it is a lot, but we're talking about a lifetime of earnings, right? 25 to 65. How much money you would need to have the things that we want, not necessarily need. So we were looking at what people were actually searching for on our site. We always do this. And last year, the American dream kept popping up. And it wasn't like, what is it? But could I ever attain it? And given the price of everything, especially housing, especially education, and rising costs for healthcare, more and more people felt disassociated with it. So we put this number on it. But these are, again, are the wants. We're talking about having enough for retirement, right? Having enough to pay for a wedding, raising a couple kids, sending them to a public university. So 4.4 million over that lifetime. Yes, a big number. Last year, a little bit closer to 3.5 million. But we looked at what people actually want, not the essentials like housing, right? You got to feed yourself and you need healthcare, but all these other things, having a pet, paying for a funeral, buying a few new cars over the course of a lifetime, this adds up.
So how are we seeing the high cost of this American dream change how people are actively living their lives? For example, renting versus buying a home, even the number of kids you have. How do you see these shifts sort of play out?
Right, and the funny thing is, this number is what we thought for a household, right? 3.3 people, but people make choices about their lives. Some people don't want kids, some people don't want pets, some people don't have a used car. But if you think about the things that we might want, reasonable expectations, that's where you come up with this number. So people are coming up with creative ways of putting this together. But one thing is absolutely certain. If you work for a lifetime, 40 years or so, at the median income, you're going to wind up with something like $2.8–3 million. You're going to have a gap between how much you make and how much you might need if you need money for retirement. How do you fill that gap? You have to fill that gap by investing, by owning assets. You have to have your money working for you while you're over here working and getting paid. Your money's got to be working in the background.
And how does this change depending on demographics when we talk about the racial wealth gap or even the gender pay gap as well?
Great question, because this is a big number for anybody. But when you look at the median income, that could apply to anybody. But we know people make different choices depending on the communities that they live in. People make different life choices. Again, some people might not want to have kids. Some people might have a dual income family. Having a dual income family is a great way to achieving this number and beyond. If you have 2 people working, even at the median income, you'll wind up with something like $5+ million over that course of a lifetime. You might be in a pretty good position to make these choices that you might want to have. Taking an annual vacation, right? Or having a pet, having a few pets over the course of a lifetime, sending kids to college. But if you look at what different generations are doing and different racial groups, they're making different choices so that they can live their American dream, whatever that is.
You mentioned investing in the stock market. Are there other things that people can do to try and reach that number and make it a more attainable goal?
Yeah, and the thing is, it's your number, so you have to come up with whatever your number is. And the most important thing we talk about, especially in financial planning, is what does it cost to be you, and what does it cost to be the you want to be? Once you get to that number, work your way backwards. So if you work your way backwards, maybe that number for you is $2 million. Maybe it's $6 million. It depends on what you want ultimately. So working your way backwards from that and saying, if I make X amount and I get a raise of 3% a year for this long, but I invest and my money is compounding, that is a way for me to achieve these goals. And that's what planning is all about. But also you have to have asset ownership in this country. That's just the way it is in this American form of capitalism that we've come up with. You have to be invested and you have to have asset ownership, whether that's a home or other assets that are going to appreciate over time. You have to be in there, and you have to be in there early. The earlier you start, the better off you are. That number doesn't seem so intimidating if you start investing and saving when you're 25 versus 45.
Yeah, we can stop that there. I think that was pretty good.
Yeah.
I'm gonna let you speak on this. You the
Hey, because
financial.
I was, my brain was going.
Yeah,
on
I already know. Yeah. Go
So
ahead.
what he said is very true. This is, and like he said, that was over a lifetime, $4.4 million. So it's not like, okay, I need 4.4 right now, but that's something that one, that is over a lifetime. The one thing that I will say, this is what I love about what I do in the financial industry, right? In the financial service industry, because that's why we do what's called a needs-based analysis, right? Based on what your goals are. Like you said, everybody's goals are different. Everybody's dreams are different. Everybody's starting point of financial circumstance is different. But based on where you're currently at, right? It really does play a factor. So this is so I'm not sure what data they use to come up with that number, because that does play a factor. But just know that 4.4, right? Don't use that as your standard, because your standard might be a whole lot different. You may not want pets. You may not want to buy a whole bunch of cars. I know
Right.
some people that's in their 30s and 40s right now only had one car the whole time and never had
Yep.
a note, right? So it depends on, one, how you manage your money and having that planning. So I'm glad he mentioned financial planning, because that's very, very key to be able to understand what your situation is. Two, I'll give you a tidbit, right? There's something called, what we use is called a wealth number, right? Or a financial independence number. So that's the amount that you really need to be able to live comfortably, right? And so basically, this is how you do that, right? So you take whatever you want to live. Let's say you're using retirement, for instance, right? Let's say that, you want to live off whatever that age is. You want to live off of retirement. You want to live off $100,000 a year in retirement. That's a six-figure number. That's pretty good start, right? So if you take that number, right, and you divide that by 0.06, that's going to be about 1.2 or $1.7 million. So now you have so $1.7 million will be your financial independence number, your wealth number. Similar to kind of what you saw, right? Because everybody's different. So saying 4.4, but let's say that's your number. That $100,000 a year is your number. So let's imagine you walk into a bank, right, every year, and you have $1.7 million saved up in there, right? You walk into that bank, you take out $100,000, right? Live off of that for the year, because that's what you said you wanted, right? That's your number. Now you go into the bank the next year, right? And that 1.7 is still there. Then you do it again, another 100,000 for the next year. You keep doing that year on end. That's why that's the financial independence number, because that means that you have $1.7 million sitting in an account that's earning 6% every single year. So that's why he said getting invested and finding those vehicles that will give you that rate of return, right? Usually putting your money to work for you. right? That's really the key, right? And making sure that you're not only investing and you have these things, but your money is also protected. Your assets are protected as well, right? So at the end of the day, right? Everybody has a number. I have a number. You have a number. Everybody has a number. So I would say this is a good starting point to give people an idea, but that might not be everybody's American dream, which is why I thought that it was good that he said, whatever that is for you. So you
Right.
see this 4.4, don't get alarmed and say, oh man, I need to have $4.4 million. No, because you may not even need that 4.4. You might even want that 4.4 in reality when you
Right.
look at your standard of living and stuff like that. Right. So that's why it's always good to, when you say financial planning, get with a financial professional. Get with somebody that knows they're talking about, that can give you those options, give you those tools that you need, give you the understanding that you need to be able to get to that goal, whatever that is. You know what I'm saying? And be able to hit that number.
Yep.
Right. And then let them show you, okay, this is where I can put my money, but how do I go make more money? Because a lot of us are not in a position where we can actually get to that number in reality. So now how do I go out and make some more money? How do I reduce my taxes? How do I do all those things? That's why he said financial planning is very important. So I thought that was a really good video. I'm gonna go back and watch the rest of that and just kind of see
Yeah.
some of the other stuff that he said. But my brain was kind of going. I'm like, oh man, I see
Yes.
this every other day.
Exactly. That's why I
So
wanted to end it. I wanted to end it on that. And honestly, I think you hit it well. So I'm not even gonna really add too much to it. I just want to say I appreciate everybody for tuning in. We're going to try to keep this format going. I don't know how you feel about it, Christian, but I really enjoyed this format, the way that we did it.
yeah,
I think we can kind of do more shows like this because I think it kind of adds, multiple topics that are very key that happen, throughout the week, and keep people informed, on a greater scale, versus just doing one video at a time. And
absolutely.
get a lot of content in at once. And I think we did it relatively quickly. So yeah, with
Yeah,
that being said, I just want to say, yeah, thanks again and good night. Make sure you like, subscribe, and share this with your friends. If you caught some value from it. So,
absolutely. Y'all have a blessed night.
yep.